Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, my kids. In our last lesson, we talked about art and music, how they are different in different regions, and how they are affected by geography or land of this region and the resources found there. We have learned also that art and music are some ways to communicate our culture. Stories are another way to communicate culture. Do you remember that culture is the way of life of people? Telling stories is a way to communicate about culture. It passes from one generation to another. There are different types of stories. Some stories teach a lesson. Some explain natural events. And others use magical creatures or imaginary places to teach us about ourselves. Folk tales are stories passed orally or spoken from one person to another. The stories can be true or untrue. Folk tales often describe traditions or values of a group of people. Let's now read an example of a folk tale together in your book, page 189. There once was a man who rode a camel through the many regions of Egypt. He saw the great sands of the western desert and the palm trees in the oasis in Siwa. He rode through rural areas and met farmers growing cotton. He watched the boats in the canal region and visited the great pyramids in Giza. He saw the dam in Aswan that helps control the flooding of the Nile. When he returned home, he described each of the places he visited to his wife. His wife wove planks with images that people thought looked real. She wished that she had seen the amazing things her husband had seen, but instead, she wove beautiful blankets that looked like the places her husband visited. One day, the wife was shaking out the blanket and that looked like the Great Pyramids. It had many shades of brown for the stones of the pyramid and beautiful blues for the sky. A strong wind came and stretched out the blanket. It stretched and stretched until it was as big as the pyramids. The wife stepped carefully onto the blanket and visited the Great Pyramids herself. Did you notice that the places mentioned in the story are real? Do you remember them? They are Western Desert, Oasis Siwa, Canal region, Great Pyramids in Giza, the dam in Aswan, and the Nile. But pay attention that some of the events, especially in the last paragraph, are impossible or seem magical. So it cannot be true. Of course, it is impossible for a strong wind to stretch out the blanket to make the wife visit the pyramids. So this story is a true story. It contains real places, real regions. It is about a traveler on a journey. He visited many regions in Egypt and told his wife stories about these regions. Another way now to communicate culture is waving. Here are the regions he visited: the Western Desert, oasis in Siwa, Canal, Great Pyramids, the dam in Aswan, and the Nile. These are the regions that the traveler in our story visited them. Let's see another way to communicate culture. Here is the blanket. See, my kids, here is the blanket with the pyramids. It's a magic, of course, to get into the blanket to visit the pyramids. So this is impossible. It's a folktale story. Another way to communicate culture is waving. Waving is the craft or action on forming a fabric using threads. To make blankets, to make carpets, for example. Also, folktales can help us understand the culture better. They help us learn about different regions in Egypt, life of people in those regions, and the importance of weaving and art in Egyptian culture. My kids, this was the end of our lesson today. See you next lesson. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.